She combined these qualities with warmth, humor, and an unerring ability always to see the best in people.
Britain had heard Charles Spencer defend his sister before, but nothing prepared the palace for what he revealed this time. In his possession was a private letter Diana had written during one of the most painful chapters of her royal life, a message that did far more than describe heartbreak. It addressed Camilla directly, warned what her future inside the monarchy could mean, and left behind words that suddenly threatened to reopen wounds the palace believed were buried forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles Spencer chose a documented private interview to break his silence, with the original pages still in his possession. The letter, he explained, had been preserved rather than destroyed because Diana believed a moment could come when her sons would need to understand what she feared for the monarchy's future. A royal household is the network of staff and advisors supporting senior family members, and this letter reached beyond private heartbreak into questions that could affect that structure. Spencer held the pages alone before the interview began. He read his sister's handwriting once more, stopped at a line concerning William, closed his eyes, and placed the letter flat on the table. He was not handling an old family keepsake. He was confronting Diana's voice, reaching into a future she never lived to see, and the thought changed him before he spoke. Charles received the first palace briefing in silence. The king read steadily until he reached the passage describing Camilla's possible future at the center of royal life. Then he stopped. He set the file down without speaking, leaving the aide opposite him unsettled by the absence of anger. Diana's warning was not simply about another woman. It was about memory, and whether the institution might someday smooth away the pain William and Harry had witnessed as children. Camilla faced that question minutes later. An aide handed the Queen Consort a transcript, meaning a written copy of the disclosed letter, and she read several lines without moving. Then she stopped and asked quietly, "Who else has seen this?" The room offered no immediate answer. That silence landed harder than any accusation. Spencer had revealed enough to shock Britain, but not everything. One passage had been withheld, and William soon learned why. Diana had written part of the letter with his future position in mind. The letter had shocked the country, but its true force would be measured when her brother, former husband, eldest son, and the woman at the center of her warning confronted the same words, with nowhere left to hide together. Behind the constitutional titles were four people carrying four completely different versions of the same history. Charles Spencer saw a sister whose voice had outlived her. William saw a mother whose fears had followed him into adulthood. Charles saw a past he could never rewrite. And Camilla faced something perhaps more unsettling than public criticism, the private judgment of a woman whose absence had shaped every step of her own royal future. Spencer understood that revealing the letter had changed his role completely. For years, he had protected Diana's memory as her brother, but now he had become the messenger of words written for a future she would never see. William carried an even heavier burden. As the future king the heir expected one day to inherit the crown, he could not respond only as a grieving son. Every feeling had to pass through duty first. William read the passage concerning Diana's sons twice. The prince did not raise his voice or call anyone into the room. He folded the transcript, meaning the written copy of the original letter, placed it beside him, and remained completely still. His mother had feared that one day loyalty to the monarchy might collide with loyalty to his own memories. Now that fear no longer felt theoretical. It had reached him directly. Charles carried a different kind of pain. The king had spent years learning how to live beyond the collapse of his first marriage. Yet Diana's words pulled him back toward choices that had shaped everyone around him. He asked an aide to leave. When the door closed, the monarch returned to the page, ran one finger beneath a sentence mentioning William, and quietly said Diana's name. For several seconds, there was no throne, no title, no institution, only a man facing someone he could never answer. Camilla discovered something equally difficult inside the letter. The Queen Consort understood that Diana had separated personal forgiveness from institutional acceptance. One meant releasing private anger. The other meant deciding how the monarchy itself should remember the past. That distinction threatened her, because it suggested she could be accepted personally without ever replacing the woman whose history remained tied to William and the crown. Spencer then disclosed through his documented interview that Diana had not written the message impulsively. She had revised it, dated it, and entrusted it with instructions that it remain private unless royal circumstances changed dramatically. That detail transformed the letter from an emotional outburst into something deliberate. And it raised the question nobody inside the palace could ignore. Why had Diana believed this exact future might arrive? The answer led back years earlier, to one specific encounter that changed the purpose of the letter completely and turned private heartbreak into a warning about the future of the crown itself. The letter did not begin with a prediction, it began with a confrontation. Years before Camilla would occupy a central royal position, Diana experienced one private palace encounter that convinced her the battle was no longer simply about a marriage. It was about memory, legitimacy, and what her sons might one day be asked to accept. Charles Spencer says that evening became the trigger, the precise moment his sister stopped writing about her pain and started writing about the crown's future. Diana had already understood that her own position could change. Her marriage was breaking apart, and palace conversations were shifting away from repairing relationships toward protecting the monarchy's long-term stability. The royal household, the staff and advisors responsible for supporting senior members of the family, was increasingly focused on continuity. But what frightened her was not simply losing status. She feared William and Harry might one day be expected to support a cleaner version of history, one that made their mother's suffering easier to forget. Diana reached her breaking point after a private palace reception. She overheard senior household figures discussing how Camilla might eventually be welcomed into royal life if enough time passed. Later that evening, she confronted one of the officials directly and asked whether her sons would be expected to publicly support that transition. The answer was careful, controlled, and deliberately incomplete. Nobody said yes, nobody said no. That silence shook her more deeply than an open admission would have. Diana telephoned Charles Spencer soon afterward. Her voice began sharp with anger, but her brother remembered it changing as the conversation continued. She told him she could survive losing rooms, titles, approval, even the illusion of belonging. What she could not accept was William being pressured to pretend the emotional cost had never existed. Spencer listened as his sister became unusually calm. By the time the call ended, he understood something had shifted. She was no longer reacting to the past. She was preparing for the future. Diana began writing that night. She argued that Camilla's eventual place within royal life could never be separated from the way the palace treated her sons' memories of their mother. Then came the warning that gave the letter its real force. If the crown ever forced William to choose between institutional loyalty and the truth he personally lived through, the institution itself would create the conflict it claimed to fear. Spencer received the envelope later. Diana held it for one extra moment before handing it over, and gave him one instruction: never use it out of anger. Decades later, those words became crucial. The past had finally explained why the letter existed. Now her brother was preparing to face Charles directly, and prove that bringing Diana's warning back into the palace was not revenge. There are confrontations that explode, and others that become more dangerous because nobody raises their voice. When Charles Spencer finally sits opposite King Charles with Diana's letter between them, there are no cameras, no cheering crowds, and no public statements to hide behind. Two men connected forever by the same woman face one another across decades of grief. And Spencer makes one thing brutally clear: he did not bring Diana's words back to punish the king. Charles agreed to the private meeting because the letter had turned an old family wound into a national crisis. Silence could now look like fear, guilt, or refusal. Spencer arrived carrying the original pages inside a protective folder, but he made one boundary clear from the beginning. The palace could respond to the document, but it would not control it. The palace here meant the royal household and its senior advisors, the people who manage official decisions around the monarch. Charles asked the question that had been waiting between them. Why now? Why reveal Diana's words after so many years? Spencer did not flinch. He explained that the timing came from the circumstances his sister had described, not from bitterness. The king tightened his jaw but stayed silent. His former brother-in-law continued, saying Diana had feared William might one day be forced to accept painful decisions in the name of royal stability. Spencer leaned closer and told Charles that his sister's real concern had always been her sons. The monarch answered that William was capable of making his own choices. Spencer met his eyes and replied quietly, "That is exactly why her words belong with him now." The sentence landed hard, because neither man could dismiss it. Diana had not written for a frightened child. She had written for the man her son might eventually become. Charles then learned something more unsettling. Spencer had not released the entire letter. One paragraph remained private, because Diana had directed it specifically toward William's future responsibilities. The king immediately asked whether his son had read it. Spencer confirmed that he had, and the prince's reaction had not been rage. It had been determination. Charles reached toward the folder, then stopped halfway across the table. Spencer noticed the hesitation. Neither man moved. Finally, the king withdrew his hand and asked him to read the hidden paragraph aloud instead. Spencer did. The words did not demand Camilla's removal. They did not call for punishment. Diana had left William something more powerful, a principle about memory, loyalty, and truth. And once the future king understood that distinction, the balance inside the palace began to shift. The hidden paragraph changes everything, because it contains no demand for revenge. Diana does not ask William to humiliate anyone. She asks him to remember. Her message is painfully simple. When his authority becomes strong enough, he must never permit the institution to purchase harmony by rewriting what his family endured. Suddenly, the letter is no longer merely about Camilla. It is about who possesses the moral authority to define the monarchy's memory. William understood the weight immediately. As the future king, the person expected one day to inherit the crown, his judgment would increasingly shape the tone of the monarchy, even before he formally became sovereign. He could not control every palace decision, but his voice already carried unusual force. Diana's message therefore placed him in an impossible position. Protect the institution he was born to serve, or protect the emotional truth his mother feared might be softened for the sake of unity. William met Charles privately and placed the hidden paragraph between them before saying a word. The prince told his father he had no intention of using Diana's memory as a weapon against Camilla, but he also made something unmistakably clear. Reconciliation could not require silence. The king listened without interrupting, because he understood exactly what his son was drawing a boundary between accepting the present and rewriting the past. Charles felt the pressure immediately. Supporting his wife could not mean asking William to dilute his mother's place in the family's history. The monarch knew that distinction mattered because Camilla's personal position beside him was one question, while Diana's historical place was another. Blurring those two issues might create temporary peace, but it would leave deeper resentment underneath. William then made his position even firmer. No official effort, he insisted, should ever present Camilla's acceptance as though Diana's suffering had been nothing more than an uncomfortable chapter the crown successfully moved beyond. The prince also demanded that his mother's charitable legacy, private archives, and historical role remain independently protected. Those archives were collections of letters, records, and personal material preserved to protect her story from being absorbed into a simplified royal narrative. Charles stayed seated after his son left. The king looked toward the closed door, then back at Diana's words. Resistance slowly gave way to exhaustion. He now understood that opposing this principle would not simply defend Camilla. It could place him directly against William. Spencer had achieved something extraordinary without holding royal authority. By placing Diana's own reasoning in her son's hands, he had turned memory into influence. William believed he had drawn a fair line between memory and revenge. Camilla would not see it that way. When she learned exactly what boundaries were being discussed, the quiet balance inside the palace began to fracture. For years, Camilla had survived public hostility, relentless comparison, and the burden of occupying a place once associated with Diana. But this was different. Criticism from strangers could be dismissed. A private letter written by the woman at the center of that history, and now taken seriously by her son, could not. When Camilla finally learns what William intends to protect, she realizes the document has not stripped away her position. It has done something subtler. It has defined its limits. Camilla received the explanation quietly. William was not demanding changes to her marriage, title, or immediate public duties. The dispute centered on Diana's historical place and how the palace treated that memory. The royal household, the staff, and advisors who support senior family members could accept the queen consort's present role without allowing it to erase the woman who came before her. That distinction offered reassurance on paper, but emotionally, it felt far colder. Camilla removed her reading glasses and placed them beside the transcript. She stayed seated after her aide left, staring at the words without moving. Anger would have been easier. Instead, humiliation settled in. She had spent years building a stable place beside Charles. Yet Diana's voice had returned with enough force to remind everyone that acceptance did not mean replacement. Camilla later told Charles that she felt she would always be measured against someone who could no longer answer back. The king listened, then answered with painful restraint. Diana's inability to respond, he said, was exactly why the words she had left behind carried such weight. His wife looked away. She understood what he meant, but understanding did not make it easier. Camilla then asked the question that changed the mood completely. Did Spencer possess more letters? Charles could not give her certainty. The possibility of additional writings immediately widened the threat, because one disclosure had already altered the emotional balance inside the family. Another could reopen everything again. Camilla learned something even more difficult soon afterward. William had specifically rejected retaliation. The future king was not trying to destroy her, remove her, or publicly shame her. His position was built around protecting Diana's legacy, not punishing anyone. That made his boundary harder to dismiss as resentment. Charles reached across the table and took Camilla's hand. She allowed it for a moment, then slowly withdrew and asked whether he agreed with William. The king hesitated before saying Diana's place must remain secure. That pause told her everything. Charles would defend her dignity, but he would not fight his son simply to make Diana's memory less uncomfortable. And away from the palace strategy, William and Spencer were about to decide whether the letter would remain a weapon or become something far more lasting: protection. After the arguments, the briefings, and the reopened wounds, two men sit together without courtiers to translate their emotions into palace language. William is Diana's son. Charles Spencer is her brother. Between them lies the letter that has unsettled a king and shaken a queen. Yet the most important decision is no longer whether the document should hurt someone, it is whether Diana's final warning should become an instrument of permanent conflict or a boundary that allows everyone to move forward honestly. William met Spencer privately with no aides present. The prince knew this conversation belonged outside the machinery of the monarchy, because no official could explain what Diana meant to either of them. Spencer understood the same thing. A courtier is a member of the royal household who serves or advises the family, but none were invited into this room. This was not about protocol. It was about memory, grief, and responsibility. Spencer explained why he had refused to publish every line. Diana had feared her words could one day be used as ammunition in a family feud. Her intention, he said, had been preservation, not retaliation. William listened carefully, then admitted that seeing his mother's handwriting had pulled old memories back to the surface. He had spent years learning how to carry grief quietly, but reading her fear for his future made that discipline feel suddenly fragile. William paused before telling his uncle what hurt most. Diana had worried about burdens he eventually did inherit. The future king had spent much of his adult life balancing duty against deeply personal history. Exactly the conflict she had feared. Spencer lowered his eyes. For the first time, guilt replaced certainty. By releasing the letter, he knew he had placed his nephew under enormous public scrutiny. Spencer apologized. William stopped him. Silence, the prince said, would not necessarily have protected anyone. Sometimes history becomes heavier when nobody is allowed to acknowledge it. That answer changed the mood between them. Together, they made the decision that would define what came next. Diana's unreleased personal passages would remain private. Her warning had reached the public, but intimate words meant for her sons would not become entertainment. William also decided the letter should eventually be preserved alongside her historical material, with clear context explaining that it reflected her fears during one painful moment, not a command for future revenge. Spencer slid the original envelope toward William. The prince touched it, then gently pushed it back. It should remain where Diana had placed it, he said, until proper archival arrangements could be made. For the first time, the letter stopped feeling like an explosive secret. It became a shared responsibility. William and Spencer had chosen restraint. Britain had not yet chosen anything, and by morning, One front page would turn their private reckoning into a national storm. By sunrise, Diana's private warning is no longer confined to royal rooms. It is on breakfast tables, television screens, phones, and newspaper stands across Britain. Some see vindication. Others see an old wound being reopened. But almost everyone understands the same thing. A woman gone for decades has suddenly re-entered the national conversation through her own words. And outside Kensington Palace, one spontaneous gesture captures the mood more powerfully than any commentator possibly could. Britain splits almost immediately. One side sees the letter as proof that Diana understood how complicated Camilla's eventual place would become. The other warns that private pain should not become a permanent sentence against anyone decades later. Kensington Palace, the London residence closely associated with Diana and members of the royal family, suddenly becomes the emotional center of the story again. Yet the palace response remains controlled. No attack is launched against Spencer, and nobody publicly questions Diana's sincerity. William receives a summary of the coverage, but refuses to spend hours watching commentators pull apart his mother's words. The prince asks one question instead: how are people responding to the protection of Diana's charitable legacy? His focus matters, because the debate is no longer simply about old wounds. It is about whether her public work, her influence, and the pain behind that history can remain visible without being turned into a weapon against Camilla. Then one front page captures the mood. A major morning newspaper prints Diana's photograph beside 4 stark words. Her words came back. Within hours, people begin gathering outside Kensington Palace. One woman places a handwritten card among the tributes. It reads, "You were not forgotten." That single message spreads across broadcasts, because it expresses what thousands appear to feel without demanding anyone's destruction. Charles watches coverage of the gathering and becomes noticeably subdued. The king has lived through decades of public judgment, yet the affection surrounding Diana still carries enormous force. He understands that the mother of his sons remains woven into Britain's emotional relationship with the monarchy, and no official strategy can simply remove that reality. Camilla makes her own decision through silence. The queen consort does not challenge William's boundary publicly. She does not ask Charles to reduce Diana's presence in the palace response either. Her restraint becomes significant, because fighting back now could make the letter look like the very threat it warned against. Spencer then issues a final clarification through the same documented interview in which he disclosed the letter. He says his purpose was to preserve his sister's voice, not demand anyone's downfall. Britain had delivered its reaction. The headlines had spoken. The crowds had remembered. Now only one judgment remained: what Diana's words would mean after the noise disappeared. In the end, Diana's hidden letter does not remove a queen, destroy a marriage, or force the monarchy into collapse. Its impact is deeper and more human. It compels 4 people connected by an extraordinary history to acknowledge something the palace had spent years trying to simplify. Moving forward is not the same as forgetting. Charles Spencer had returned his sister's voice to the institution she once struggled inside, and that voice ultimately demanded memory, not revenge. Spencer understood that his part in the story had reached its end. Through the documented interview in which he first disclosed the letter, he made clear that no further personal passages would be released. Diana's central warning had been heard, but the intimate words entrusted to him would remain protected. Historical preservation meant keeping important records safe for the future, and the letter would now be treated as part of her private legacy, rather than ammunition for another royal battle. William reached the clearest decision of all. The prince would not use his mother's suffering as a permanent weapon against Camilla, but he would never allow Diana's place in royal history to be softened, simply because remembering it made the institution uncomfortable. For the future king, that distinction became the line that finally separated loyalty from silence. Charles accepted that boundary during one final private conversation with his son. The king acknowledged that preserving Diana's legacy did not weaken his marriage or diminish the life he had built with Camilla. Father and son did not suddenly agree about every painful chapter. They simply stopped demanding that the other interpret the past in exactly the same way. Camilla faced the hardest acceptance. The queen consort understood that Diana would remain permanently woven into the emotional history of the monarchy. Her own position could be respected, without requiring another woman's memory to disappear. Later, she sat with Charles after the final palace briefing. The monarch closed the folder containing the controversy and said there would be no campaign against Spencer. She looked at him, paused, and nodded. No victory, no humiliation, just acceptance. Diana's letter was then placed on a path toward careful preservation, with the most private passages protected. What began as a hidden warning ended as guarded family history. Spencer had ensured his sister was heard. William ensured she would be remembered. Charles accepted the boundary. Camilla accepted the reality. Diana's final victory was never over another woman. It was over erasure. The letter had arrived like an accusation, but it endured as something more powerful, a reminder that reconciliation can change the future, while memory protects the truth of what came before. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.